Do you think SDA as a sector is delivering on that promise to bring that independence, dignity, and quality of life for the average SDA participant?
This might be slightly controversial. SDA can't just be about the built form, obviously. It's about community and connection and location. Is it delivering on the promise? I think for a lot of people it is providing that independence and dignity, but people are probably a little bit carried away in the finer details of what the built form of SDA is rather than what the meaning is behind it.
What is this thing called SDA? I don't understand it. How do I know what the NDIS pays for and what I'm meant to pay for? And it's just such a whole new world. It can be very confusing, can't it?
We often focus on this journey, and I think that there's so many different parts of the ecosystem. It makes it quite difficult and very intimidating for someone coming into it for the first time. Start to think, okay, quality is being priced into the market and I need to operate with excellence or my vacancy is going to skyrocket, which is fantastic. We've been waiting for that tipping point for quite some time. So there's just no room for those low quality providers anymore.
The NDIS to me is a beautiful meeting point between meaningful work and the ability to grow a business, right? And it's very hard to find sectors that have both of those things.
How can we create something that is more than just the property, really? And that comes down to convenience and user experience and all the things we've spoken about, but it's also about community, finding a place that you genuinely feel belonging in, and that's lifestyle and connection and a bunch of other things which any person wants when they're looking for a home, right?
Welcome to the Steadway NDIS Podcast. My name is Chris Hall, your host, and I'm honoured to have Jacob Collier on the line with me today. Jacob is the CEO of Vera Living, which is one of Australia's largest SDA providers with properties across multiple states. And Jacob and I have known each other for a few years. And what we're going to do today is talk about the state of the sector, so to speak, from an SDA perspective. And we'll deep dive into strategy, where the industry is going, etc. So Jacob, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Chris. You got me here finally. It's been a bit, so thank you for the patience.
No, good on you. Welcome. So look, you've been the CEO of Vera Living for approximately 8 years. So I'm sure you've seen all sorts of evolutions of the industry as well as the organization. I'd love to just to go straight down into the deep and meaningful of what's happening in the industry, right? So when we think about SDA, of course it's about independence, right? From a core supports provider point of view, there can be misconceptions, just because someone's got SDA doesn't mean that they necessarily need massive levels of core supports. They might have a quite independent life because of the building, because of the technology, because of informal supports. And that's beautiful, right? So it's meant to be one way or another about independence, about dignity, about quality of life. But I suppose my question to you is, from a sector perspective, if you think about broadly across Australia, do you think SDA as a sector is delivering on that promise to bring that independence, dignity, and quality of life for the average SDA participant?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think this might be slightly controversial. Personally, from what we see here, I think that for a lot of people it does, but for a huge number of people it doesn't. And part of that is because we're hamstrung by land prices and different business models, but it's also partially because SDA can't just be about the built form. Obviously, it's about community and connection and location, which we'll go into quite a bit as well. So is it delivering on the promise? I think for a lot of people it is providing that independence and dignity, but people are probably a little bit carried away in the finer details of what the built form of SDA is rather than what the meaning is behind it, is probably the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all depends on, I guess, the type of provider, but also the journey of where the customer is at. Because we've got clients that, have transitioned from hospital, and they've had things happen in their life that means they've got their first SDA plan. And so the NDIS can be completely new to them. So if you think about the customer journey, so to speak, it's like, oh my goodness, my life's changed forever because, a life-changing event has happened. What is this thing called SDA? I don't understand it. How do I know what the NDIS pays for and what I'm meant to pay for? And it's just such a whole new world, it can be very confusing, can't it? So I suppose if we just tap into that side of the customer journey for that type of cohort, so to speak, I think that's quite relevant, isn't it, in the way that SDA providers and core supports can engage with that person to help them understand.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the journey of SDA is we often focus on this journey, and I think that there's so many different parts of the ecosystem. It makes it quite difficult and very intimidating for someone coming into it for the first time. You'd know better than anyone that in SIL supports or providing a broader range of services, the number of acronyms alone are prohibitive to someone seeing all of this for the first time. But because the ecosystem is complex, you require the support coordinator to be on board. You need a well-written occupational therapy, report. You need very good supports advocating for you through years. There are huge barriers to entry, and then also the lack of information and clarity on the SDA side as well. The built form where these things are located. Is this property right for me? The journey is absolutely at the heart of what we try and do to bring someone to a better property.
Absolutely. I mean, we recently we spent about a month putting it together. We did like an e-learning product on the Steadway website, which is completely free. And it's literally an animated series with my cheesy Pommy voice going, hey, you've got SDA. And it genuinely explains the actual nuances of it because we recognize that, you've got the hospital angle, you've got I'm in a group home, but now I want to live by myself. I know the NDIS,
Yeah.
but I want a change of housing. All these things, we call it the insider's guide for good reason, because people like yourself, well, you know the industry. Certain support coordinators will know it, but other ones it might be slightly new. So as ever, there's never ever really one person that understands the entirety of the NDIS. But if you can have an expert in your corner that says, look, these are your options and this is how it could go, that's also like take even Appendix H, about being able to live by yourself, maybe with families, loved ones, all that stuff. That stuff is so crucial, isn't it? Because I think people can be a bit um, stuck in the lane of, oh, but my plan says this is all I can do. Like you need that expert on your side, don't you, through that journey?
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost a project manager in a way to get through. And that honestly is the most important part of, I think, where SDA providers and SIL providers need to collaborate is providing a pathway, a very clear pathway for someone who might not have those supports as well. We see people who from thousands of data points, by all means, will absolutely get SDA funding if they go through the throes of the process, but it takes a very, very long time. And so you need someone to be able to almost orchestrate, be the conductor to bring all of that together. So I think that's probably one of the most misunderstood parts of what an SDA provider does. We're really a glorified project manager for someone in a way,
Mhm.
not demeaning the built form, which we'll speak about in some detail, I imagine, but it really is just providing support first and foremost that someone can get to the other end and receive supports in a safe place.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're very passionate about bringing, should we say, systems level holistic thinking to the process because, again, I know I'm deep diving here, but take, for example, someone moving in. Well, that
Mm.
can often lead to, quite rightly, a OT to assess whether or not the person might need a handrail in the bathroom or some kind of assisted tech. Like, of course, that's formally the job of the support coordinator. Whilst that's true, um, it really helps, doesn't it, when SDA providers are on board, SIL core support providers on board with understanding that that's a project and that is that critical for before moving or not. All the pieces need to line up. So yeah, you need experienced people that know what they're talking about, don't you, one way or another, to make it smooth.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, look, one of the trends we're seeing at the moment is a lot of people coming forward with potential. It's difficult to say the wrong level of funding, but it's not the most supportive level of funding
Yeah.
from, let's say, a typology perspective. So somebody who their occupational therapy report shows that independent living would be perfect for them, but unfortunately, the agency has assessed it as a three-resident house. This is something that
Yeah.
we speak with other providers about all the time. I'm sure you see this all the time with the people you collaborate with. So a big movement in the sector, I think, is, well, where does the onus fall for that? Who holds responsibility for that particular outcome not stacking up and that person not moving into something that's going to allow their life to be more full? we're seeing a lot more SDA providers and asset owners
Mhm.
taking the responsibility of paying in advance for those support coordination hours to make sure that that person can get a change of circumstance, for example, and move into the right property for them. And so it's a very complex responsibility matrix of who puts their hand up for all of these things. And I think being part of that conversation is sort of something we'll start to see a lot over the coming years.
I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a beautiful, heartfelt business strategy because if you were to put it in business coaching terms, what you're doing is you're de-risking the sign up from the customer's perspective, right? So you're saying, hey, it's okay, maybe we can get you into this place, and then in the meantime, we're going to submit. And again, that's not that it's not always going to work out that way, but it's very kind of it's well intended. It can address the situation, and of course, it takes time. And of course,
Yeah.
not every SDA provider can promise that they're always going to be able to do that. But the stars can align, can't they? Where they go, well, look, we know we need to fight for better funding. Let's have a pathway to do that. Get you in the meantime. I agree. I've seen that trend too. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, I think it's the way it should be. Sorry, I keep derailing the conversation, but there's absolutely a path that we're seeing where uh, as quality increases across the board, and we're certainly seeing this in every state because every state thinks about certain assessments and building differently, of course. So it's quite niche, depending on where you are. But participants, for the first time, true to the scheme, are being able to vote with their dollar. And
mm,
because there's now enough SDA around, 5 years ago there was nearly nothing, and so people said, well, I need to be able to receive good supports in this property, so I must move 50 minutes away over here. Now that we're not at maturity yet, but the sector's certainly getting there. As a provider, the obligation is on you to provide the best possible service and the best possible property because that participant is just going to say, well, I'm just going to move down the road here with
mm.
my supports. And so for the first time, we're seeing SDA providers in particular, certainly some SIL organizations, but start to think, okay, quality is being priced into the market and I need to operate with excellence or my vacancy is going to skyrocket, which is fantastic. We've been waiting for that uh, tipping point for quite some time. So there's just no room for those low quality providers anymore.
That I think is only a healthy thing. It may create more movement in the market, literally in terms of the ferventness of competitiveness amongst providers. But the NDIS was always intended to be a scheme, fulfilled by a private marketplace. So it speaks to the philosophy well. And then if you think about even the way that the sector's changed, I think that even 2 years ago, maybe still to some extent, you've still got some of these cheesy adverts where it's like invest $500,000 in your self-managed super fund and you can get 1 million%
Yeah.
return.
Yeah.
That self-managed super fund, nan and pops, kind of like, oh, I'll just build an SDA house. In
Yeah.
a good way, I hate to say it, but in a good way, I think that's starting to phase out because those properties weren't up to standard always. Not, sometimes they were, but not always, and they weren't run well enough. So I feel like in a good way, it's starting to shift towards not just about the bigger players, it's about the competent players, right?
Yeah, that is 100% accurate. There's probably two parts to it. The bigger players, or in the SDA space, we would call that sort of your institutional investor market versus your mum and dads, your nan and pops. Sorry, that's the British coming
It
across
is, isn't
the.
it? Sorry,
the
yeah.
no, no, not at all. Um, Mum and dad capital is just not the right type of capital for this market for a number of reasons. It's very complex, and that's not to demean anyone who wants to invest because they have the best intentions of people and the greater good at heart. That's fantastic. But the first of all, availability of capex. If you're a mum and dad investor and you pay for this incredibly well-specced property with all the best intentions, it is much more risky knowing that you will have the safeguard of tens of thousands of dollars in maintenance spend if the assistive technology breaks down or the backup battery or any number of specialized pieces of kit in that property. And so that makes it very dangerous for a person, particularly with life support needs, living in an SDA property. The other risk, which we see quite a lot, is you've got this concentration risk that institutional investors remove, where if you're a couple and you invest in a property, it only you have a three resident house as an example. You've only got three speeds. You've got one person, two people, or three people, or it's empty, which happens in a lot of cases. If you are only two out of three, that the numbers don't work, and so
Mhm.
you're pushing everything you can to get that third person in there, and you're almost incentivized to take on someone who isn't the right match for the other people in the property. And so there's all of this investor pressure. When you have an institutional investor who has 100 properties, the portfolio risk is blended, where with a lot of the people we work with, we have the, I won't say privilege because it is just human right, but we make sure that we can make the ethical decision where there might be a three resident home, two people are perfectly matched, and we don't even look for a third person in that property because there's no need, because various other properties are at 100% occupancy, and so the blended average is okay. That type of thinking is absolutely the way forward. You need more sophisticated and more ethical capital in this market. And that's exactly why there are unfortunately thousands of vacant dwellings in some very thin markets where the investors probably don't even look at the demand data. They just trust a builder and off they go. And they've built all these properties that sit empty, which is very sad. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The direction the market is going is promising, finally.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think also I use the word competency as well as size reference before as well, because they can be related. I know that I personally always built my business to scale from the beginning. And that's the attitude I've always taken. I always say, well, how can I build to, a top 25 Australian business from now? And it's starting to work, right? It's starting to really go whoosh. But I'm lucky enough to have 15 years of coaching behind me, whereas, a lot of smaller providers can be well intended, but they don't have the business running background. So I guess I'm making this reference because the way that you run your business, as well as the CapEx pool that you've got, is extremely relevant, isn't it? That can be even understanding the concept of customer journey. What's your technology? What are the account managers that you're adding in to make sure everyone's happy? Certain these things are only possible with resources and with scale and time and maturity of operating a business, right? So I think that's relevant too, isn't it? As it becomes more competitive, it's not just about whether the house is a piece of crap in the middle of nowhere. It's about how well you run the experience of interacting with you as basically as a landlord.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, 100%. Look, we built this from day one, also with the capacity to scale, because we knew that a platform business would get efficiencies that meant we wouldn't have to charge higher prices for anything. You just have to get to that scale, which is a problem that every provider in the scheme is facing, and certainly on the SIL side as well. But the other thing we made sure of is that it was a people first business, which sounds like an absolute throwaway line. I'm conscious of that, but we have made sure that we've made decisions to maximize the experience for people early on to build a reputation. And so that that has meant that has been very capital intensive for us. We've had snide remarks from certain people in the sector saying, how can you possibly have that much staff or that many staff in your business? You're only running this many properties. And it's like, we need people on the risk side. We hired very early on the legal side. We hired very early on the operations. We do all of our asset management in-house as well. We don't outsource that to a third-party provider because we want to understand how to close the circle and provide end-to-end experience. We develop our properties internally, so we know what's behind the plaster. Having all of that was extremely important to us. And so similar to Steadway, and we have seen you guys take off. It's been wonderful to see. But unfortunately, this is a sector where the pricing pressures, not
Mm.
just from the agency, but also for land pricing and construction pricing for us, has forced people to be more efficient. And so scale really is one of the few ways to ensure that you can also be ethical. So
Correct, correct. Yeah, because you can do more, not with less, but you can do more effectively with the resources that you have as you hit that tipping point, right? It's interesting. Let's talk about collaboration, right? So Vera Living, SDA, right? You do the house. Perfect. Then you've got what's commonly referred to as the SIL provider, but it could be the core supports, it could be the on-site shared service, the OOA, depends on the model, right? But either way, Vera Living is collaborating with multiple providers that do the support worker side. Okay. Um, from your perspective, what does genuine, effective collaboration look like between a company like Vera Living and the other providers? What does it look like effectively, and also where does it break down typically in terms of that
Yeah.
interaction? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know we're very soon to be working together, so I've got to be careful with my answer on this one. Um, Genuine collaboration, I think, is look, the first word that pops to mind is actually compromise in a way.
Okay.
I think that both the SDA provider and the support provider need to be aware that we both have to make compromise at a certain point. And that might be, so on your side, for example, something which is just being very transparent, which we're seeing a huge amount in the market, and any SDA provider who listens to this will certainly feel the same, I'm sure. Participants who are, and rightfully so, wanting to bring their own supports, or SILs who are saying it's a three-resident house, or there's four villas on a block or something, and to mobilize without us hemorrhaging money, we
Mhm.
need it to be 75% full, or we need two out of three people in there, or something like that, because the ratios of support work are a commercial reality that we can't ignore, and we can't ask you to take that on. And likewise, there are people who might come along with the perfect level of funding and still supports, but they haven't quite got SDA funding yet. And they're going through that process, and our data tells us it should take about 9 months, but who knows, it could be 18 months. It's very difficult. And so there's very real agile decision making between us where we're saying, okay, look, we've got four properties together on these two. We're going to take the risk on this person's SDA funding. We can see that, but we really need you to mobilize early on this one, because then two other people we think will be interested. It's that type of problem solving. And that's very hard to do through a computer screen and over email. And we just don't see people doing that type of problem solving in the market enough. This is, as much as you and I just spoke about scale, that part of this is very human, and it's not something that's just going to be able to be solved. I'm sure there's people that are AI experts who are going to say that's ridiculous. We can solve that immediately, but certainly not in the very, very short term. It requires a lot of very active involvement. So that to us is true collaboration.
Yeah, makes sense, and I agree. I think that kind of when there is a collaboration agreement for say a site, is that joint sense of responsibility as well, right? You should be going to the networking events independently and together, all that stuff. You should be bringing in the leads together. You should be
Yes.
figuring out what can you do on this particular situation. Hey, can we move them in a week early and do this and do that? You've got to both bring that business generation, so to speak, in terms of, actual inquiries actively with each other. So I think that, you know, when I used to be a coach in the industry, it was a sales and marketing coach, right? And I think that what I love about the business I've created now is it's a genuine mission to lift the standard of care in terms of the quality of the service, and also at the same time, it's okay to have a commercial mindset. So what I mean by that is it's okay to say, hey, we need to have better search engine results. We need to have more lead inquiries. Like it's okay to you can still recognize that we are engaging with incredible humans that are our customers, right? And at the same time, we need to go, it's okay to say, well, look, I need more inquiries, I need this, I need that. I guess what I'm trying to get to here is that again, it's the recognizing the NDIS to me, sorry, I'm blabbing on, is a
No, no.
beautiful meeting point between meaningful work and the ability to grow a business, right? And it's very hard to find sectors that have both those things. Like we could just go into finance, so to speak, and just make money for the sake of making money without the meaning, right? So we are
Mm.
at a very unique place to be able to do so. It's okay as a company to talk about, are we sustainable? Are we profitable? Are we scaling right? Because again, one of the last attendees to the podcast was the CEO of the National Disability Service. And in the state of the sector last year, just in December, 2025, it was that 48% of providers are making a loss. And again, with my coaching mindset, I go, oh my goodness, that's a systemic risk. So what am I trying to say here? It's okay to talk about money, it's okay to talk about inquiries, but of course it shouldn't be just about the money either. It's about the great, beautiful impact we can do. But we just need to bring something to the table when we're collaborating as still an SDA, basically. It can't just
Yeah.
be like, oh, but you didn't do that. You haven't brought the leads. Oh, you've got vacancies. What are you doing about it? Like that's the wrong attitude, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you touched on a lot of brilliant things there. I think you just going back about to halfway through what you were saying, where
Yes.
it absolutely is about both of those things. What is also wonderful about the scheme when it works is that they also can both be true. Now,
Mm.
in a lot of sectors, we see it as a very zero-sum
Yeah.
game. In fact, in a lot of real estate, it's a zero-sum game. The developer charges more, and all of a sudden you're paying more for a home. Now, someone gets more and someone gets less, very, very evenly almost.
Mm.
Um, in this sector, good inspires good. That sounds a bit cheesy, but as in if you are offering a high quality, efficient service, you will generate more traction in the market, as you've seen. And so you're encouraged to do good. And so that's what I touched on right at the start when we first jumped on is that it's very perverse in certain parts of the NDIS where those things are working against one another. And I think for the first time, SDA has rounded the corner and now it's pushing in the same direction. It's not a zero-sum game anymore. People know that if they provide better quality properties in better quality locations and they actually look at their data, then there's going to be better outcomes for people and you will grow your business. And so that's really and that is the most simplistic view. There is a whole litany of economic reasons why SDA has also been hamstrung, and there's pricing issues and land appreciation and a whole bunch of things. But um, that your point definitely resonates with me, and I agree. It's good to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess it only anchors me back down to the experience, right? So let's say you get a great reputation with the discharge team from New South Wales Health. Fantastic. You've demonstrated that you can turn around, a discharge within an X number of weeks, etc. Competency, you always you don't want a plumber that can just gas bag. You want a plumber that can fix your pipes, right? You want someone that's competent. So yeah, it really that makes a lot of sense. I think also just some of the user experience things like you've moved into a property. Let's say, for example, if maybe the SDA team's got an office in a certain city around Australia, and there might be a regional site that's 2 hours away from the office, but you've got your on-site SIL provider. Things like that, with proper synergy, there's so many opportunities to, even though it's technically the SDA provider's responsibility, well, maybe there should be like a printed welcome pack. That as soon as the SIL provider has the first shift with them, you go, hey, welcome. I know there's a lot. We're moving into the house today. It's a big, big, big day. But just so you know, here's the printed pack. It's got all the numbers we need to call if we've got issues with anything. And imagine if the support workers could actually understand what that means, right? So it's not the kind of like, oh, but he said that and she said that. That's an example of experience. Like, where are the keys? Show me the welcome pack. Like, it'd be lovely to
Yes.
have the organization just working like that. That's what I intend for our collaboration, that kind of level, right?
Exactly right. Oh, look, that is the magic. Not to demean anyone in the building industry, or certainly people in our team who do this day in, day out. But the again, I keep coming back to this. The built form needs to be exceptional. It needs to be higher than minimum standard. That is very, very important. But the whole experience, the rest of it is what we're seeing anyway in the
Mm.
data is why retention is high and people stay, and also people are attracted to it as well. It's about that experience and
Correct.
little.
Correct. And I'm very analytical. I go from the bottom up and I think about even like the way you sign up to Wi-Fi. Well, if you've got assisted tech that can bring the blinds up and down and open the door, well, guess what? That's already programmed to a particular Wi-Fi network. So wouldn't it be nice if we, rather than causing a kerfuffle and having to sign up to a new Wi-Fi provider, well, let's lock in the one that's recommended that's already set up. Ta-da! You move in day one. Hey Google, open the blinds.
Yes.
Zzz. Like that
Yeah.
matters. That's what experience is, right? Oh my God, do you know what just happened? I'm recording this podcast and I got my bloody Google speaker on.
Yeah,
I just said those words and it started speaking back to me. Shut up.
yeah. I was waiting for you to use one example because if it was anything Apple, this whole room would have gone off. So I'm glad that you went with Google. That's yeah.
Oh God, forgive me. All right, let's go on to about like criteria, right? So there's I think there's often a lot of misunderstanding about what being eligible for SDA actually means and whether it's understood in the broader ecosystem of the industry. Um, Broadly, at the industry level, do you think that the current framework of SDA eligibility is understood sufficiently? Um, and what, and if it's not, then how could a better understanding of that potentially solve broader house crises matters, etc.?
Yeah. Uh, the answer to your question is no. People do not understand it. It is phenomenally complex and nuanced. And going back to an earlier point, it relies on so many different people in the ecosystem to understand it, not even the participant, but you rely on all of these reports and going through layers of application. We put our best foot forward a few years ago to understand it. We actually collaborated with Greg Barry and the team at SDA Services, who are quite a well-known specialist support coordinator. They do a lot of wonderful things for people in the SDA space.
Yeah.
We built an eligibility tool alongside Greg, and we used one of the mathematical geniuses on their team to sort of codify what was in the legislation and try and build it into a tool so that it was not just plain English, but going through, you would say, I have this many hours of support, and these are the different things that go into very high support needs or otherwise. And it gave you a rough, at least indication of what your next steps should be. And we built it to be quite conservative. So, we had all of these nightmares about giving people false hope. So we spent a huge amount of time on it. And it's still reasonably widely used in the sector, but even with that tool, it is so misunderstood, and you still have to uh, rely on the NDIA understanding it themselves to approve it, which is why there is this huge number of people appealing and looking for a change of circumstances and a variety of other things and taking it all the way through to tribunal. So it's not perfect. It's very misunderstood. If it was understood better, and as you mentioned, particularly by the states,
Mm.
I think there would be a tangible impact on social housing waitlists. Definitely.
I agree with that. I mean, I about half a year ago, I think it was, had Lyndall Robertshaw, who's this group CEO of Home in Place, on talking about, the housing crisis and how it links to disability. Yeah, and she did allude to that it's very common to have a decade wait list, even when you need it, and of course there's triage and prioritization and all sorts of stuff, but the situation tends to have to be it's necessary for it to be super dire in order to get bumped up that list because it truly is a real crisis. So even if I would like to draw some relativity to that and say, well, look, you've got a 10-year wait list over here, certainly not perfect, but even if you have to do a change of circumstance and then the ART, that might take you 1 to 2 years, but it's better than 10. And I know that
Yes.
sounds horrible to say out loud, but at least it's a comparative.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've worked fairly collaboratively with a couple of community housing providers, and we've seen some of the wait lists, and it is in so far out of Sydney, you're still looking at 7, 10 years on
Mm,
wait list. There is a very significant proportion of people that have a disability flag, is what they call it on a lot of those lists for people who have applied. Even if that person then gets to the front of the list and what is available is not accessible, that's not a suitable outcome for that person. And so, from all angles, having another form of housing available to take the pressure off that list, but then also support individuals who may also have a condition that's deteriorating, help them
mm,
in the shorter term, seems like absolute low-hanging fruit to the state government. And I'm sympathetic to a bunch of very complex intersecting things that the government has
mm.
to deal with, but it is a very, very quick win, I feel, if the government addressed that in the short term. Yeah.
Yes, and then you've got state incentive versus the federal scheme that is the NDIS. So then there's a little bit of a, ooh, I suppose like also I think about efficiency of stock. So you've got, when I say stock, I'm talking housing stock, right? So let's imagine if you are a community housing provider, yes, there'll be the bells and whistles, new places. You go, ta-da, here's a lovely new property. But, want to deep dive on this a little bit. Sometimes there's existing stock. Like I know of some people that we support that have got community housing, one person, and they're living in a three-bedroom house. And you go,
Yeah.
wow, if I just, I don't know, threw 100 grand at this or something, I reckon I could convert this, into, maybe an SDA compliant property. So like, this thing sometimes it's just the level of strategy and willingness to implement that and go, well, wait a minute, we could 3x on the efficiency of number of tenants in property A if we just had that kind of perspective. I'm not sure if it exists yet at the level of state and federal leadership.
No, look, I can't comment on what's going through their minds, especially with the housing crisis we're in. But I agree that it feels as if there could be state leaders that could just take the next step and look into that strategy. I am aware that a number of states are looking at what they can do with their
Mm.
dilapidated stock. And as with everything, there needs to be tenders and submissions, and it will take a very, very long time. And they're tied up in fairly complex ground leases, and it is a lot. But on the flip side, it is thousands of properties literally sitting there that in fantastic locations as well is
Right,
the other. Yeah, they're brilliant locations. So
right.
that would help. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And again, forgive me, I'm not trying to get political. It's not my intention. It's more like, for example, I know that the team at Achieve Australia, they're doing amazing work, been going for more than 75 years, wonderful organization. And I believe some of their properties, they've now, through their SDA partner, they've got them managed essentially from former hospital system stock. So like, it used to be part of mental health and this and that, and there's these wonderful, like, and now they're utilizing them. So there are success stories that do exist out there in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So let's talk about the way that developments occur, right? So there is SDA data out there in terms of essentially a demand map that the government will publish. Every single SDA developer wants to go, ooh, what does it say for how many units are demanded in Liverpool versus how many exist? The problem with the demand map is the time lag in between. So the kind of almost cliche risk right now is, oh, let's build a house in Liverpool. And then 20 developers come in and there's all this SDA stock and then there's oversupply. So it's a pendulum that has a risk of violently swinging too
Yeah.
far. So given that Vera Living is, a mature organization, I believe you do focus more on institutional investors. So, you're kind of really risk analyzing every single place that you invest in. How do you basically ensure that you're not overdeveloping? What signals and what strategies are you looking for to make sure it's the right balance?
Yeah, this is such a great question, and there are so many parts to this, so you might have to cut me off a little here. But
Do
so
it.
to answer your direct question first, uh, look, you can't beat boots on the ground. Once again, this is the manual part that you can't really program, and you need to have local knowledge and understanding. Uh, Standing there talking to you about what you're seeing through your lead inquiries and where people actually want to live, you cannot beat that. So working with SILs, speaking to support coordinators, getting out there in front of discharge nurses at hospitals and understanding what that is like. That is probably the most important litmus test following the desktop review that we look at. But you're absolutely right. The data is lagged. It takes a long time to catch up. The other reason that there is so much oversaturation is because the actual building side of SDA is not regulated. You can be a developer and you can go out and you can get either a DA or a CDC or whatever it might be over what you're building and build this thing. And all you are concerned with is that builder is selling it. And so, unfortunately, there are people spruiking these things. And so you get back to that mum and dad market. I think that a lot of people have seen that Four Corners episode. Mum and dad money is not the right capital for this sector, but it's also not thousands of mum and dad investors who are evil out there trying to swindle the scheme. There's a lot of builders who are saying, I'm going to go and target very unsuspecting mum and dad investors who think that they're actually doing a good thing. And I'm going to sell them this product that I've built in Melbourne West or Ipswich, where there's 10,000 other things that are sitting there vacant, with the 1,000,000% return, like you're talking about.
Mm.
And
Mm.
then nothing happens. They make off into the sunset. And mum and dad are sitting there trying to figure out how they can repay this mortgage.
Mm.
So the data sadly is not stopping people from building where it is extremely cheap to build, where there are
Right.
massive land subdivisions. Those people are not looking at the demand data, which is why this keeps happening, because there are still mum and dads willing to pay for what they think is a good investment product. And there's been multiple releases now from the agency, from our peak body, the SDA Alliance, and various others, warning people to do their research. This is not just this investment product that's easy. So that's why the saturation keeps happening.
Mm.
Also, I feel there's something to be said for how this is going way too detailed now. So
Do it.
put
I like
me up.
it. Yeah.
In the last pricing review, the location factors that we look at for different areas were only done at an SA4 or a statistical area 4 level, which it was a huge amount of work that all involved had to go through to have that price review done. But an SA4, to give you an idea, so the Gold Coast is one SA4, and so you apply the same weighting to the value of how much revenue you're going to get. If you're at the northernmost point of the Gold Coast and the southernmost point, as we know, prices change by suburb. It is a
Yeah.
lot granular. And so this multiplier, which in this sector we call the location factor, uh, it's nearly impossible to actually incentivize the right builds in all of the right areas. It's very, very, very difficult to do to get that granular, which is another reason why people are just not building in the right places, because people are trying to game those regions. So I'm sure you've seen that plenty on your side as well.
Yeah, yeah, okay, that's really interesting because again, SA4, that's referring to the geographic area, right? So you can have,
Yeah.
at higher levels, you've got like proper full regions, you've got cities, you've got local government areas. Is it SA2? Is that which one where you go if you go down to a particular suburb? Like I used to live in Avoca Beach, so that was Avoca
Yeah.
Beach and Copacabana next to each other. I don't think that was an SA4. I think that was even more granular suburb specific level.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. It goes down to, yeah. So SA2 is very granular. Even an SA3 would be, which is, in the middle, would be better for these purposes.
Hmm.
But yeah, so it's painted with a very broad brush, and unfortunately, developers are trying.
Okay. That
So,
that is interesting, right? So it's basically the feedback is it's too broad. Like it's great that the demand data exists, but you know, um, like there's some lots of wonderful SDA developments across here in Gosford, and you guys have got a lovely property in Point Frederick down the road. I know for a fact that our office, if I look out my window right now, I've got the Imperial Centre shopping centre, and I know that it's relevant that I can get thinking about disability. You got a flat zebra crossing, go straight in there, go up the lift. All that stuff is relevant for like
yeah,
level access, for example, close to the hospital, to town, to the bus. And so it really does speak to a lot when I think the uninformed investor might go, oh, but the land's cheap out here, an hour west of Brisbane or whatever. I'll just build a house there, and then they wonder why no one moves in. So it's you've got the mismatch of like clearly not understanding the area, the too broadness of the demand data. I think the boots on the ground feedback's really interesting. Let me segue into development times as well, because one thing I know that, common conversation, I'll be having it with like, with your team often and things like that would be like, okay, when are we getting the OC? That's the occupation certificate, right? When's the OC coming? And they go, well, the builder said it should be good by April. Good. And of course that's the target. Inevitably in construction, there can be delays, right? And that's the nature of things. The segue I want to make is to alternative construction methods, right? So I'll tell a quick story and it'll make sense here.
yeah,
My wife and I, she's American. We get the in-laws coming to visit, and we were like, great, let's get a tiny home. We'll stick it in the back garden, right? And we thought, oh, look at that, 50 grand, 100 grand, we get a whole new apartment block. It's like a granny flat, but half the price. Brilliant, done. And we nearly bloody bought one. We thought, this is great. And then I rang my mate Ted, who's a certifier, right? And he's a private certifier. And he went, no, 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 no. It's just one opinion, but hear me out. He went, that stuff's made in China. Nothing against China, but that stuff's made in China. I don't know what the walls are made of. If it's set on fire, does it completely go off like a firework? I don't know. I can't certify that. And also, you get a lot of tiny home manufacturers that say things like, oh, don't worry, just stick it in the field and put it on a trolley, and then the council can't tell you to take it away. You go, oh, but is that true? So there's a lot of kind of these things are popping up where you can go, oh, it's really tempting to do the tiny home, etc. But I think I want to see what your opinion is on that particular thing because they exist, by the way. I've seen them. Like you get the two-bedroom, wheelchair accessible, probably won't comply with anything. But in theory, the temptation's there to go, here you go, put this, put it in a field, and you're done. And it's not 2 years anymore, it's ready. Would you agree that there's too many, you can't verify the quality of the build when it comes to things like tiny homes in particular? What do you
Uh,
think?
First of all, I think you should absolutely get a tiny home in your backyard. That would be wonderful. But that I look, we have a few modular builds that
Okay.
we think is part. So we've used modular in the past. We've seen that come a long, long, long way. We were
Yes.
speaking to modular builders 4 years ago and going out to their factories and thinking, this is a disaster waiting to happen. Or it looks amazing in the factory, and then the actual ground team who put it together, like this big Meccano set
Yeah.
on site, it's all about your site conditions and things that can go wrong during that process. So the idea was there. It's taken a long time for it to come up the curve. We now work with a couple of modular builders where we think it's fantastic quality.
Great.
Uh, does it bring the price down? No, it doesn't.
Hmm.
Um, because you can all, this is going to be a very generalist and naive comment for anyone in the building sector, but you can infinitely scale labor in a business to go and build 50 homes at the same time. You just need staff and you just need capital to effectively grow that business.
Mhm.
If you have one factory, you can only build so many houses at a time, and assemble it and then take it out to site and finish building it. And so because the supply is somewhat constrained, it is going to be more expensive. But what as a trade-off you do get is
Mm.
time. You
Mm.
can be very controlled about your time, and we are seeing that now. And so I agree with one part of what you're saying. There will be build types out there and new innovations where you will be able to say with far less error margin, to these three participants, we've been working with them for 18 months. They're so looking forward to this being delivered in May. And then something happens, the landscaper is late, or something happens where, the driveway getting poured is one we always see, and we can't get certified. We can't get our SDA enrollment. We can't get OC for a certain period. And that's a really difficult conversation for you and I to have with people that are excited to move in. So we're seeing that margin for error decrease, but it's certainly not the silver bullet yet for the sector. And tiny homes, very difficult. I mean, we always build above minimum standard for size because you can just, I mean, you know this way better than we do, working with participants and approvals all the time. It's
Mm.
You can never have too much storage or too
Yeah.
much extra space. It is just a rare commodity.
It is, but it's still an interesting proposition. Like I think about things like the Hunter Valley, and you can get 100 acres of land for, quite
Yeah.
cheap. And in theory, if you had maybe I shouldn't use just the term tiny home. You've got the shipping container style ones where they fold out and it's a beautiful two-bedroom house and da 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 da. Like in theory, if you get cheap land and planning approval and it's properly up to spec and all that stuff, you could have like a village. And the difference is that you don't have to maybe share, that property with someone else. It could be your own independent abode. And like, of course, it's tempting, but the reality is different. Just to add to your comment about does it save money? No. Also, does it save time? Not necessarily, because I'm open to the idea of prefab, but um, I know for a fact from being in the industry and speaking to some of these developers, there can be a dependency disconnect sometimes between the supply of the prefab. So here's your gorgeous units, they come, they're ready to go. And then the building company can vary because you're saying you can scale labor, right? Unfortunately, if your local labor crew of XYZ Construction Co. doesn't know how to put together that kit and they're a different company from the supplier of the prefab, well then it just falls apart, right? And then the whole project can blow up, get delayed, etc. So I
Absolutely
suppose,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So like, so then
Yeah, that's
yeah,
particularly in this economy that you could not be more correct. That yeah, my comment there is way too generalist. Yeah, in this economy, trades are incredibly scarce, and it's just one reason construction costs are going up so much. But
yes.
uh, so yes, it is definitely reliant on that. Yeah.
I think they need to do an Elon Musk where they vertically integrate. I reckon if you had some prefab companies that say, our
Yeah.
crews are specialists in putting this together, and we can genuinely put it together in 6 months rather than a year or two, just give us a concrete slab and the DA, crudely
Yeah.
speaking, then that might be a genuine thing that could emerge. But maybe what I'm hearing from this, maybe it needs to mature a bit more, as you say, go up the curve of maturity so that they can bring an more end-to-end solution for prefab. Maybe do you think that could be a possibility in the future?
Definitely. As more people adopt it and move towards it, and the trust of the product builds as well, I think absolutely there will be more innovation that allows that vertical integration. I mean, there just has to be, right?
Yeah.
Especially as trades. I mean, I come from Perth originally, and I know that during and post COVID, what it went up to for bricklayers per brick. Because we still build everything in brick over there for whatever reason. So it's just ludicrous, and so there needs to be innovation in the sector.
It
Yeah.
does. And let's see what happens with 3D printing. You never know. Like, I don't know, maybe eventually 3D printed houses can be put up in a few weeks or months. You never know the
Maybe.
way they might eventually go. I know the state governments are interested in that. They're doing projects in Tasmania, they're doing projects everywhere for that. Um, Interesting. Okay. Um, Let me ask a couple of final questions. I want to respect your time and keep this on track. Is the sector genuinely innovating in design and delivery of the way it brings SDA projects to the market? Or is it just on average meeting the minimum standard? So again, I know you'll be kind of torn between speaking to what your organization does versus the broader industry. Yeah. Is it genuinely innovating or is it just meeting the minimum?
Uh, it's a tough question because we see certain parts of it innovating so much, and then certain parts that are stagnating. I think that affordability at the moment and the business model that underpins SDA is very restrictive, and land has gone up so much that uh, people are really fighting just for survival, and so affordability at the moment is trumping innovation and it's strangling innovation. And I imagine that's the same in a lot of your peers in supports as well. From
Mhm.
what we're seeing, it's very very difficult. Um, there is a lot of good innovation. There's good innovation in the built form side. We're seeing a lot more people come up the curve in sophistication in the customer experience piece as well. So SDA is finding its feet and innovating slowly, but certainly not to the extent that we need. And we're really hoping that the 2028 price review for us supports the difficulty that's happened over the last few years. And certainly now with global events, what it looks like is going to be happening for at least the next 6 months to 12 months, to allow people to start to not just fight for sustainability, but to actually start to innovate again. And it sounds horrible. This is just a natural fact of business. But when you've got 100 things keeping you up at night and you're fighting for survival, you naturally start to move away from how to work on the business and be better and innovate. So you always need to remind yourself of both lanes in a way. So yeah, we're slowly getting there. There's also a huge amount of consolidation in the sector, which is happening, which is making things more efficient. I won't harp on about that, but I think that there is a huge amount of innovation in the next few years that's possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. Good. Um, And then speaking to maybe some of the people that are thinking of either investing in a home um, or working with an SDA provider, what are some of the misconceptions that people have about running an SDA business themselves?
That it's easy.
Yep.
Uh, I think I mentioned the phrase earlier. We see so many people just think that it's a build it and they will come philosophy. Uh, it's not commoditized. This is not just an asset class that you can just throw money into. It is extremely complex and human centered. And I would say there's lots of ways you can find high quality SDA providers. And I would encourage anybody thinking about investing in this. Well, first of all, to be blunt, if you're not a large fund, I would say don't invest in this.
Mhm.
But absolutely do your research, and 10 times more research than you think you need to do, because it's a lot more complex and a lot more risky than people think.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. Just to give a chance to kind of plug Vera Living a bit, do you want to tell us about what's on the horizon? We're recording this as we're inching into the second, phase of 2026. What's on the horizon for Vera Living over this year and next year? How are things looking?
Things are looking bright for us. I mean, we're collaborating with fantastic people, which is good. I think for us, the next couple of years, we've hit scale as well, and by that I mean we're at a point now where we are finally refocusing on all of the innovation that's possible and being the best possible service provider and having the best offering. So we are looking to move into a lot of new areas, some brilliant places in New South Wales and Victoria. And I think for us, what we're really going to double click on, and you spoke to it quite a bit earlier in our chat, but is that customer experience. How can we create something that is more than just the property, really?
Mm,
And that comes down to convenience and user experience and all the things we've spoken about, but it's also about community, finding a place that you genuinely feel belonging in, and that's lifestyle and connection and a bunch of other things which any person wants when they're looking for a home, right?
mm,
Yeah, that's really our focus over the next year, and continuing to collaborate with great people. I mean,
mm,
sales, working with good disability organizations just changes what is possible in
mm,
this sector. 5 years ago, we naively thought when we went and spoke to some of these really big sills that that was the answer. It was just partnering with one sill. And there was all of these tenants that were like, oh, I'm so ready to move into a great property. And all the paperwork was all done and everything was all very easy. And that's not it at all. And then it shifted back in the other direction where SDA providers were doing this terrible thing where they were even charging some sills to have their on-site overnight assistance, and which is just completely unethical and we think creates perverse outcomes. And so finally, I think it's back in the middle where it comes back to your question on collaboration. How do we work the best together to ensure that people are getting what they need? So
mm.
yeah, very, very exciting next 12 months for us. We're looking forward to it.
It is. And look, I know the answer to this, but I was very impressed by it when one of your business development managers told me, how many units across Australia have you guys got?
We have about 750 tenancies under management now, and we'll be at nearly 1,000 by the end of May.
Wow. That literally gives me goosebumps. That's incredible. As I know you guys do an amazing job of the experience and the quality of the properties, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, that's fantastic. I really admire what you guys have achieved as an organization. Um,
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Well, listen, Jacob, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. And for any of those that want to find out more, and we can put it in the show notes. Vera Living is the organization that Jacob leads. And at Steadway, if you ever want to find out more about SDA itself, just simply go to steadway.com.au and /SDA, and you'll see that free e-learning product where you can literally learn about what funding means, what your options are, etc. And you're welcome to give us a call and we'll have a chat with you about that. So, Jacob, once again, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for the opportunity. That was great.
Cheers, everyone. Catch you soon.